Hey everyone, hi, welcome back to my channel. This is Harry, or Harry Cutie Pie, as my kids like to call him. He's being very sweet. Today I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read in June. In June, yes. I'm like, what month is it? I don't know. Anyhow, I am going to be talking about my June reads, and boy, was that a month. So if you're new to my channel, then hi, my name is Shelly, and I really love books and reading. I really love stories, storytelling, things with stories. I love hearing a story from other people. I just really enjoy a good story. How many times can I say story? Oh my gosh. If you're new and you're enjoying the vibe, I would encourage you to subscribe. Subscribe and stick around. Maybe like the video. And without any further rambling on, let's go ahead and get into the meat of this video. In the middle of May, I decided very spontaneously to host a historical fiction readathon. And it ran for the month of June. And my reading was very historical fiction focused. I just called it Read Historical Fiction 2024. That was a hashtag, and it was a whole lot of fun. There was a bingo board. I will flash my bingo board up in case you want to know exactly what I read for which prompt. But mostly I'm not going to go through the prompts in order. Like, I'm just going to talk about my reading organically and know that there was a lot of historical fiction reads going on because of this event. And I think I would like to make it an annual event, and I would love to keep it going and maybe kind of grow it a little bit. But I would love to continue to read historical fiction in June, partly because it is one of my favorite, if not my favorite genre to read. And, oh my gosh, I almost like choked on my own spit. And I have the summers off, at least right now, because I'm a teacher, and it's just a great time to get a lot of reading in for me. It's very free, you know, I have more free time than normal, at least at this stage of my life, and so it's just a whole heck of a lot of fun to read one of my favorite genres, if not my favorite genres, when I have the most free time. It's a win-win situation. And so I think what I'm going to start off with are the DNFs and then the disappointing reads, the books I didn't like. And then we'll kind of grow from there. My first DNF was Pope Joan by Donna Woolfolk-Cross. We're going to really get into what I don't like, especially when it's this clear. So Donna Woolfolk-Cross with Pope Joan was clearly trying to get a message across. She had this very clear theme, this very clear idea. Now, it's not even an idea, because an idea you can sort of circle around and massage out and, you know, kind of come at it in a bunch of different directions. It wasn't that. It really was a message. I got it right the first time. The message was, you know what, how would a woman in a, you know, patriarchal society, in a society that oppresses women, that doesn't allow them to have learning or anything, what would happen in this world that was incredibly oppressive, because we're in the 9th century? What would it sort of take for a woman to get an education and to rise in the ranks, especially if she was already a talented and gifted young lady? And that was really the idea. It's not really an idea, it was like the focus. It was like every single move was getting her towards, it was either showing that the world was oppressive towards women, or it was showing Pope Joan sort of defying the odds and rising in the ranks in some way, whether it be her getting her education or whatnot. And so I kind of got to the point where I was like, I get it, like, you're going to continue to meet obstacles and then defy those obstacles or overcome those obstacles. And I just wasn't here for it. I was like, I get what you're gonna do. I don't want to read you. And so I got about halfway through this and I was like, I'm done. Like, there was nothing compelling me to pick it up, because I felt like her messaging was so clear. And so I DNF'd this book. The other book that I DNF'd, which was weird that I picked it up in the first place, I'm trying to set it down so it doesn't like slam the microphone, was Counting the Cost, and it was about, I think, the Duggar family. I don't really know the family very well. I never watched 19 Kids and Counting, which makes it a weird thing for me to pick up, but hear me out. I read a couple of years ago, I read, what is it? Oh my gosh, Unfollow by Megan Phelps Roper, who was one of the older children in the Westboro Baptist Church family. And the Westboro Baptist Church was a family that was known for their picketing ministry, but their picketing ministry was really gross. Like, it was really intense. They had very slanderous, icky, disgusting things as they were picketing. And what was so interesting is that she not only broke away from this very, like, culty-ish family, but a family who has been in the limelight for their annoying, kind of gross, the way that they come across in the media. They're the most, like, obnoxious family in America. I think they were called. Anyways, I found her story really interesting because she really humanized her parents, and she talked about this very odd ministry. Like, seriously, some of their website, the Westboro Baptist Church. The Westboro Baptist Church website is godhatesfags.com, which is just an insight to the grossness of this family and, like, what they did in order to garner attention for their ministry and the sort of twisted ideas that they would, the ideas that they would tell themselves, the thoughts, the stories that they would tell themselves in order to get this messaging across. And it was really interesting reading her perspective about her family and having this really incredible, like, grace-filled perspective towards her family, but also just being very clear that, like, what they were doing was wrong and that how she's grown from that experience and how she broke away from that experience. And so I was thinking that, so we're cycling back around. Wow, the backstory, oh my gosh, okay. I was thinking that counting the cost might be something similar. It might be a perspective that I didn't know, and it was going to be about a family I didn't know, but it just didn't capture my attention. I never watched the show. I didn't also know anything about the Westboro Baptist Church when I first started reading Megan Phelps Roper's memoir, which was fine with me. She did an amazing job explaining the origins of the family and the ministry. And you know, the book, I can't even remember who it was by now, but Counting the Cost, she was doing a good job and everything. It just wasn't a very interesting story. It just wasn't. I think what I liked about the Westboro Baptist Church was the duality, the, like, very, very, very intense dualities within the family that both made it such a safe environment for the children, but such a, like, all the damage that they caused. It was just a really fascinating look at a fascinating family. And I didn't get that with Counting the Cost. So I got about halfway through and I was like, I'm done. So I DNF'd that. Okay, wow. We better move it along. Otherwise I'm going to be here for well, I hope y'all know at this point that I like to chat. So we should not be surprised. No one should be surprised as I'm talking through these books. The next two books were disappointing reads. The first one I have right here, and it is The Wife by Meg Wolitzer. Weirdly, it's the same thing as Pope Joan, the same concept. The message in this is that women are oppressed and we give up a lot of our creative lives, our, like, parts of ourselves to our husbands or something like that, or to our male partners or to men. And it was just like, I got it. Like, well, the good thing about the reason why I didn't DNF this, and it's not just, I don't know, is that she actually did kind of surprise me as to how far Meg Wolitzer took this message. She really took it to, I think, the furthest possible point in the way that we could think about this idea of giving up our creative energies to someone who doesn't deserve it. Particularly for her, she's looking at patriarchy and she is, like, railing on the patriarchy, and she takes it to, again, it's sort of like furthest logical conclusion, and it made me sort of, like, angry and upset and you know, I was incredulous and exacerbated, the whole thing, right? Like, but that's what it was supposed to do. And I probably should have summarized it. So this book is about a woman who, at the very, like, first couple of pages decides that she's like in her 60s, I think. She's like, I don't want to be with my husband anymore. And then at the same time, he's accepting an award or has just accepted an award for his literary career. And from there, you kind of go in and out of time, when they first met, why she was attracted to him. And a lot of it was like, because of his fragile ego, she gives up a lot of herself and her creative energies to her husband, which is pretty, I mean, you at the very beginning, you understand, and she even implies it, but then you kind of see how far that goes. And I think that was like the surprise of the book, but I just didn't like it. There were some things I did like about it. A lot of the literary references. She mentions this writer named Mary McCarthy, I'm really interested in now. But overall, I'm like, I just didn't love it. The next book that disappointed me was When We Lost Our Heads by Heather O'Neill. I read this on my Kindle, and it is about two women, and it tracks their friendship, starting with them as little girls. Economically, they live in the same neighborhood, but one of the women is very wealthy and the other woman is not. And it kind of tracks their respective journeys. I believe it's based off of real ladies. Let me find out who. So we're in the late 1800s and we're following Sadie Arnett and Marie Antoine. And Marie Antoine is the daughter of a, wealthy sugar factory, and Sadie Arnett is not. It tracks their friendship throughout the years. What I didn't like about Heather O'Neill's writing was just how quirky it was. I think for some people, this is exactly why they love the novel. So take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. But it was very like, it was just quirky, and it was intentionally so. And it had this darkness to it. It was almost like, to me, a story, is about these two women, but it's like, but make it Tim Burton, make it like dark, and have it, and in every aspect, it was a little bit off the rails. It kind of reminded me of Jess Kidd, like Jess Kidd's book. I just read the book Himself, and just how quirky it was, but it was definitely done in a different way. But I think that maybe fans of Jess Kidd would like Heather O'Neill. I didn't love Jess Kidd's book Himself. And I didn't really like Heather O'Neill's book. And I think it is this, like, to me, it's almost this, and I know that so many people are going to disagree, which is fine. But to me, it's almost like a bit of a forced quirkiness. It's like everything has a quirk to it. And it just didn't sit with me that well. After a while, I was like, I get it. They like dark things, like I get it, she lost her eye. Like I just kind of got to that point where I was like, oh, just get me out of this story. Because I don't think I found the friendship super charming, and I definitely didn't jive with the writing style. So yeah, there's that. My next category is going to be books that surprised me. Like they were just not what I had expected, and we'll get into why in a moment. So the first book is Fox and I by Catherine Raven. This is a memoir, and it is a nature making friends with an animal type of memoir, written by obviously Catherine Raven, who has her PhD, or was getting her PhD in biology. She's a teacher, a professor rather, and she is living on a very isolated plot of land in Montana. And a lot of it was her musings on the land and the creatures that she encountered. And most notably, it's not even a friendship. It really is observations on a fox that she ends up befriending, but in not really a way that I think we would consider as a friend. Like it never becomes to the point where it's kind of like she gets as close to the fox that she can get through observation alone and like distant interactions. And she just talks about like seeing this fox every day, or seeing this fox every other day, and they seem to almost get into a ritual or routine, but she's not quite sure. It's a little bit like, are we deciding to meet up at this same time every day, or is it just me putting my thoughts, my own human thoughts and routines onto a mere fox? And it's her musings on like nature and the land and her life, and it was quiet and thoughtful. Some of the writings were really surprisingly poignant and sorrowful, things that have happened in her life, but she really doesn't get too deep into that, like her past. It's not really a reckoning memoir. It really is a quiet memoir about this time in which she lived in isolation in Montana, and she saw this fox on the regular, and sort of thinking about what that means, and thinking about foxes in general, and getting to know this fox as best she can without like imposing herself onto the fox. It was good. It was different. It was more quiet and sort of it's a quieter book than I thought it was going to be, but surprising and interesting nonetheless. The next book is a book by someone I've read something from before. I read Doc by Mary Doria Russell back in December/January of last year and this year, and I decided to try another book of hers, and it was The Sparrow by Mary Doria Russell. The Sparrow is probably her most known work. It is a science fiction, futuristic, fantasy-esque novel. To me, fantasy and science fiction, they're very intertwined in my mind, so I'm sorry if I cannot parse that out for you. But this is the story, it's the story of, we're living, I don't know, we're in the future, right? And we know that something has happened to this Jesuit priest who has been in like first contact with an alien species, and he is the only living survivor from this first contact expedition, and he comes back to Earth and he is messed up, okay? And from that we have two timelines. We have the far future, and then like I think we're in like 2020 or something. Like we're in 2019, I think. Like the past is 2019, which is still the future in which she wrote this. So we're in, she's like setting it sort of close in the future, and then there's like a far future timeline. So it's like before the expedition and then after the expedition. My camera stopped recording. How rude. Mary Doria Russell definitely had ideas, concepts, thoughts. She was definitely driving at something in this novel. In some ways, it kind of reminded me of The Wife by Mary Wolitzer. But I felt like Mary Wolitzer and Pope Joan, Meg Wolitzer, oh my gosh. Okay, I felt like The Wife and Pope Joan, those books, the central theme was pretty simple and pretty straightforward. The Sparrow was much more a book of philosophy. It was much more thinking about questions for which we don't have the answers. Like, how do we let go? How do we get over trauma? How do we learn of something new? And in a lot of ways, I didn't know. When I first read this, I was like, like she really did have those core questions at the center of the novel. And in some ways, like she's writing around those questions, those themes. And so sometimes the characters felt a little bit distant. It was more of a theme-driven book. This book it was. But I will say that I have thought about this book. I've continued to think about this book because I thought that she took it in directions that I didn't expect. And in a lot of ways, those unexpected twists and turns were what has kept me thinking about the novel. And I mean, she's a really good writer. Some of the characters were super interesting. Some of the concepts were really, really interesting. And ultimately, like the philosophical questions at the center of the novel about trauma and found family and you know, getting to know something so foreign and the way that our curiosities lead us somewhere. And, you know, in some ways, the philosophical question is like, was this fated? Did God make this happen, or was this all by chance? And how much does religion play a part in our lives and in what we do? And can we, if we blame God for the bad things, can we blame him for the good things as well? Or, you know, like it's all of that. It's very philosophical, but also embedded in a really interesting story. So in a lot of ways, this surprised me. It just wasn't what I expected, and kind of in a really good way. I like when a book is surprising, so it's not a critique on the book. It's really just, it was just very different. If you've read this novel and you have like more articulate thoughts than I do, then please let me know. But in a lot of ways, it does touch on the themes of fate versus chance, and how much is God in control. And, you know, it also has this really wonderful found family element to it all. Some things I think didn't always work as well as I would have liked, but overall it was a really interesting novel, a thoughtful novel. Next up is going to be, see, I'm like trying to drop it so the mic doesn't pick up like, okay, next up, a book that I've been wanting to read for a long time, and it was different, and it's The Instance of the Finger Post by Ian Pearce. This is... oh my gosh. Okay, so this is a murder mystery for sure. It's a chunkster of a book. It's about 725 pages. And it is about a man that gets murdered. And we're getting 4 totally separate accounts of that murder. And wow. Okay, so the first account is from a doctor. It's set in 1663 England. And it's a murder, and we know that this servant girl, this woman, she has confessed to the murder. So the first account is from an Italian, so a foreigner and a doctor, and I liked him. I like this first account, Marco de Cola. He was interesting, lively, curious, sort of doctor-focused, empathetic character. And then we get this second character, James Prescott, and I hated, and I don't use that word lightly, but I hated him. And this is the reason why I'm surprised, is that I just didn't think that I would dislike a character so stinking much. I just felt like I was in the mind of a crazy man. like absolutely insane. And so in some ways that part was difficult. And then in the third account, you realize that there are a lot of more political aspects going on, and there's a lot more political machinations and a larger scope than just this basic murder that I thought we were going in for. And so all of a sudden the scope of everything widens, and it starts to widen with the second account. But again, you're kind of in this, I'm like, is he crazy? I don't know. And so in the third account, you're like, oh. But he's also kind of a vile character as well, the third account is. And then you get to the fourth account, and it starts to, like, the clouds start to lift, the pieces start to come together, and it ends up being a very satisfying read. I did not expect to truly despise some of the characters in the way that I did. I was like, frustrated and aggravated and annoyed, and I was like, gah! There is that section, the 2 accounts of characters that I don't like, and I was like being driven mad by it, both anger and like I felt like I was just losing my marbles. And then I felt like the first and fourth account were really, really satisfying. So it made for an interesting read, definitely unforgettable for sure, and a very different murder mystery, if I do say so myself, even though I'm not much of a murder mystery reader. It was very, very different, and really good. It was a really good book. It took, I mean, so many twists and turns. And what I liked is that as I was reading this, after I got through like very message heavy books, this didn't feel like it had any message. And I was really relieved by that. It was like, I'm just going to tell you a really interesting story and do the historical time period justice, and hopefully bring the scope out from like a single murder mystery to something that's more politically driven and has more of a macro scale. And it was all really good. And so I really appreciated the novel for that. But it was also just a brilliant murder mystery to boot. And then it led me to, see, I'm like dropping it carefully. Then it led me to, around the time that I was sort of finishing that, I started 1916 by Morgan Llewellyn, which I just bought. And it's about the uprising in Ireland. And we start off actually on the Titanic. The main character is a survivor of the Titanic. And he is survived that moment. And anyway, so he ends up back in Ireland. And in a lot of ways, that moment, the sinking of the Titanic, it really shapes his life in a lot of ways. But I am shocked that nobody's talking about Morgan Llewellyn. I am shocked that nobody's talking about Morgan Llewellyn. I feel like she's a very good writer in that she writes. Actually, she's a very good writer in the way that Ian Pears is a really good writer with The Instance of the Finger Post. There are some really, really good characters. There's characters you hate. There's characters you love. There are characters that you empathize with. There's characters that you want more for. It's like very, very character driven. And so it really touches those notes for me as a character-driven reader, but it also is about something bigger. And the something bigger in this is that Ireland is so tired of being second-class citizens to England, and they really want to have their own government, their own republic. They want to break away from England. And so there's this uprising that's being planned, and she does such a good job explaining to the reader, like getting one to understand through her characters and through these conversations, like why the Irish are so tired of their relationship with England and why they think it is so worth it to stage an uprising and to make a point. And so when things go down, and things do go down, that it's very, I think as a reader, I was very much rooting for the Irish instead of being like, I don't know, whatever I would have said otherwise if I didn't agree with what was happening. So I thought this was great. Again, it was a massive relief in a lot of ways that she didn't have this message in the middle. I mean, the message was sort of like the Irish are feeling oppressed and they want a change. But that was so not the center of, it was the center of the novel, but you know what I'm saying? She wasn't pushing ideology on me. She was trying to get the reader to understand what was happening, both politically and through like incredible characters. And what's interesting is that she has these year novels. I think the next one is like 1926. But what I found really interesting is that if you like this, you follow the same characters, but years in the future. And I don't really know, because we don't start at 1916. We start a couple years before, and we go through 1916, and 1916 is where the bulk of the action, goes down. So I'm wondering if in her other novels, we're going to just pick up more or less where we just left off, and then we'll get to like the bulk of the action at that year. But it goes all the way through to 1999. She has like 6 books in the series. We're following the same characters, but obviously they're aging and things go down, and we're all in Ireland for all of them. And I just thought, wow, what a cool series. Like, what a cool series. Highly recommend this book. And just know that there is this incredible historical fiction author named Morgan Llewellyn out there. She's amazing, and I'm wondering how many other historical fiction authors have kind of faded in our public consciousness because it's just been a couple years since they've written a book, or been a decade or 2 decades since they've written a book, but that they have this incredible back catalog to dive into. So I guess with that, there are several books that fit that concept. And right now, then we're getting into the books that were just fantastic. Really good. Well, one book I have a critique on, so I guess I'll start with that. But actually, surprisingly, it's the author that I am really excited to read from. Like, I want to read something else by her. And it is Year of Wonders by Geraldine Brooks. So this is set in 1666, and we're in this tiny little village, and the plague comes to this village, and they have to make a decision about what to do with this plague. And we're following, oh my gracious, Anna. That's right. We're following Anna. who, when we meet her, she is widowed, and we get her backstory. But this, I mean, this is an incredible read. The only thing that I will have to say is that she did not stick the landing. The ending was not my favorite. It was a little bit off the rails for my liking. I felt like it could have been way more contained, and yeah, I would say the last like 40 pages, I was like, okay, we're taking it to the point where I have to sort of set aside, we have to like suspend my disbelief, you know, a little bit in like the last 30-ish pages. But like before we got there, it was so good. It was gritty. Some of the content was hard, but in a lot of ways it like kept me reading. Anna is such a interesting, because she's a quiet and thoughtful and she meditative in a lot of ways. She's quiet. She is not somebody that you would, she's like an unassuming protagonist, and I just loved this. I love this. I mean, there are some difficult moments in here, but you could just tell that Geraldine Brooks is a really, really good author, and it's short, and I know that Geraldine Brooks has a ton of works out there, a lot of which are well loved. She won the Pulitzer Prize, and I'm like, wow, I've really been missing out my whole life with this author, because it was really good. The writing in some ways was just so vivid and poetic, and again, some of the scenes were really difficult, but in a way that like made me want to keep reading, because she just executed them so well. So good. Again, I wish the ending was different. You know, I'll live with that. It's not always about the ending, but it was just a really, really good book. Now, talking about a writer that we just don't talk about anymore, but also like should be still read today, and that is Anya Satan. I've talked about this book a couple of different times, so I won't go on at length, but this is the love story of Catherine and John of Gaunt, or the Duke of Lancaster. And again, it's doing everything. Wow, I'm really finding a theme of that. What I like, it's telling me a story, and at the center of it all, it's a love story. In a lot of ways, and I've said this, I don't know. I've said this in a couple of videos, but anyways, Catherine reminds me a lot of Jane Eyre, in that she is kind of naive towards the world, especially when you first meet her, and she is up against somebody who is a lot more cultured and wise to the world, sometimes to her, like, to somewhat in contrast to her naivety. And she grows, not just as this person, but her wants, her desires. She grows spiritually and emotionally in this novel, and that is incredibly satisfying, that component is not left out of the novel, that she really changes, and like what she wants in this throughout the novel changes, and it really fits with her character. It is so believable. She is such a rich and fleshed out character, and I really, really liked Catherine. She was really easy to root for. And it's a journey of just all these different layers, you know. But also what Catherine is doing, what Anya Satan is doing in this novel, is that she's not shying away from the ups and downs of this time period in which Catherine lived. Like, there is a lot of things going on politically. There are a lot of things just going down, and she touches on it. There are some scenes where, like, there are riots and people are upset and rumors, like intense, nasty rumors are happening, and they all are a part of the novel. They all affect Catherine in different ways, and it ends up being just really, really good. So it's like she is doing exactly what Morgan Llewellyn was doing, and what Ian Pierce is doing is like that. They're not just telling the story of these characters, but these characters are living through these events that are so impactful on their lives. And they're doing a really good job, like, capturing the spirit, the events, the concept of the time, and what those people were going through. And as a reader, I was like, whoa, I felt like I got some insight to all these different time periods and what it might have been like to be someone living in that era, and having these different struggles and problems arise. So it was just a fantastic novel. We also had, I think, probably my favorite two reads of the month. And actually, they don't capture a time period very well. I think they capture other things really well. And I guess I'll start off with The Glutton by A.K. Blakemore. I really, really enjoyed this. This was Steve Donahue's #1 historical fiction read for 2023. I bought this new. I wanted to get to it so it just doesn't languish on my shelves and turn from a new book to a backlisted book while on my shelves unread. So I'm really glad that I got to this. It talks about the Glutton of Lyon, whose name is Terrer. And yes, Shelley videos, interruptions abound. So, Glutton of Lyon, Terrer, we're following him. So, he is a real figure that was known to have eaten a lot of things that you shouldn't eat. And what A.K. Blakemore is doing in this novel is that she is taking this legend of a character and keeping it within the realm of possibility. It doesn't feel fantastical or obscene. Like, you don't have to suspend your disbelief. I think she took it as far as she possibly could without forcing her readers to suspend their disbelief with this person. You kind of get this, like, maybe this account of somebody who really just did have this insane, ravenous appetite. But really the central idea, which I really loved, is, you know, does society make the monster, or is the monster sort of always sort of living within this person? Like, who's really the monster here? Is it society placing their ideas and disbeliefs and everything onto Terrer, or is Terrer just a monster, and that he has grown in his monstrosity? But it's a weird book. It's so weird. It's dark, and it all worked really well. It was atmospheric and dark and weird. It was the whole thing. It was really well. It was really, really well done, and I really kind of it was very readable. It was just incredible. I really quite like this book. And I really enjoyed the central question of the book. And at the end, she's not answering the question. She's just posing it, which I appreciated. All right, my favorite book of the whole month, and probably for the year. I love this book so much. And it is The Dutch House by Ann Patchett. So I want to read it. I'm going to read it. I might even just start it soon. But The Dutch House, I listened to it on audio, and it was narrated by Tom Hanks. And I am a Tom Hanks girly. I love Tom Hanks with a weird passion. Okay, y'all? Like, I really love Tom Hanks. So Tom Hanks narrated this book to me. But this was also just an incredible book. It's about siblings. I forget the names. Danny and Maeve. And we meet them sort of at the end of the Civil War, not Civil War. At the end of World War II, Danny and Maeve's father buys this house that is nicknamed the Dutch House. And it goes through 5 decades of this family, and the ups and downs, and the central, this house that caused so many issues and so many problems and conjured so many memories, and was at the heart of a lot of conflicts and a lot of pain, but also a lot of joy for this family. But mostly what this is, it's a sibling novel. It is a love letter to your siblings. That's really how I took it. Just the relationship between Danny and Maeve was so incredible. And some of the things that they do as siblings is like the only, like, so I have 5 siblings myself. I'm particularly close to my older sister. And there were some things that Danny and Maeve did, like, with each other as, like, fun or nostalgic, that me and my sister would do. Like, for example, they had some of their deepest conversations in a car, like on car rides, in a car, sitting in a car, like pivotal moments that happened just hanging out with your sibling in the car. And I feel like my sister and I, we had those moments. We've had those moments, whether they're in the distant past when I was an early teenager, or whether they were just a few years ago. Like sometimes our most pivotal, deep conversations are in these incredibly long car rides, and they're just incredible. Like, and in some ways, Ann Patchett was able to capture that magic that happens between siblings that is just hard to put your finger on and hard to convey. I think when, you know, it's like, I don't know, there's just something about a sibling that is so precious and so incredible. And I felt like she was able to capture that magic between Danny and Maeve. And I don't know why I feel like emotional. Maybe it's because I really love my siblings and they're so precious to me. But she was just able to capture that. And I loved it. I loved it. Now, there is a critique. Some people just find the last scene, I don't know, a little odd. I didn't find it odd. And I know that that's a critique. So I just want to mention that, because in case you want to get in this and you're like, Shelly, you like this book that has a very weird ending, or like an odd, no, I don't think very weird. It's just, I think for some people it's like a hair too far in terms of an ending. But for me, I was like, I get it. Like, I get it. I don't know. Life works in mysterious ways, but I just loved the book. I loved The Dutch House. I thought it was just an incredible read. And I'm just so glad that I read it. I listened to it. I'm going to read it. Like, I'm going to read it. I think I should read it, like, I should start it like in a couple weeks, because I want to make sure that it is as good on the page as Tom Hanks had read it to me, just to make sure. But I just loved it. It was so good. And it's not just about sibling relationships. It's about family and the inner workings of family, and the way that place plays a role in our lives, and memory and nostalgia and all of that. And I really, really liked it, obviously. So yeah, that is it. I read a lot of books this month. I DNF'd some books. I read a lot. And there was a spectrum of books, and they were all really kind of interesting and enjoyable in their own right. And I learned something even from the books that I didn't like. So yeah, so that's it for me. Wow, what a long, chatty video. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. Tell me, I shared clearly long video. I shared, it's your turn. I would love to hear, you know, what worked for you, what didn't work for you, maybe why it worked and why it didn't work. I want to know, y'all. I want to know. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here and spending this time with me. And I will see you all in my next one. Bye.